What is up, guys? Welcome back to Flow State, and it is episode 34 today, and we've basically flipped the switch, me and Adam, over these last couple of weeks. Obviously, last week he had the guest episode with Paolo Ross, which is a absolutely fantastic episode, might I add, and if you haven't listened to that, I would really recommend it. But this week I am also joined by a very special guest and someone who is not just a really good friend of mine, but also someone I look up to as a runner, someone who's had a pretty, in my opinion, impressive career in the healthcare biz and is just an all-round fantastic human being. So I want to welcome Mr. Scott Taylor to the podcast. Scott, how are you today, mate?
I'm very well, mate. Thank you very much for having me. That's quite the introduction. It sounds like I've got some big example to follow from last week and previous guests. So hopefully we measure up today.
No, to be honest, the fact you've made it to the podcast should say enough, because we're, as much as it might sometimes feel like me and Adam have kind of dragged each other in off the street to get on the pod, like our guests, we take a lot of time, and not just anyone. And I had earmarked you a little while back to come on, and then Adam and I were obviously speaking about people who I should have added as well. Scott is also I'd say a relatively seasoned racer, someone who's you've done 4 marathons now?
Three
Marathons, a couple of halves, a couple of 10s, done a 5 as well.
Haven't done a 5 yet, actually. I did a couple of 7 and 8K races as part of a series in Melbourne, probably over the last 4 years or so. But yeah, nothing ever official at 5K as far as I can remember.
There we go. So I've already identified maybe an area we can we can work on over the next few months. But no, not at all. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I'm sure like the reason we brought you on in the first place is just you do have some really interesting kind of running experience, and again we might touch on later in the podcast just a little bit more on the healthcare side of things, because Scott, as well as working for what is I think I'm correct in saying we would kind of class it as the public healthcare system here in Australia. But you have also just kind of begun a little bit of a business with your partner. I hope or wife, I should say. I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her name, Grace. I can always cut that out if she doesn't want to be name dropped. But yes, hello to you too, Grace. And between them, they've just started Tailored Healthcare Solutions, which you guys will have heard me speak about over the last couple of weeks, obviously helping me out with some blood testing, and identified that I was indeed deficient in iron. I've since begun kind of supplementing with that, and my word, my performance has noticeably increased. Like, I have genuinely been feeling some huge benefits over the last few weeks. So it just goes to show the power of that. But that is enough of me. Scott, I think a really good place to start off today would be if you want to just go into your journey into running in the first place. Like, how did you get into training? How did you get into running specifically, and really what brought you to the point where, okay, I'm running marathons now, I'm racing, and I'm smashing PBs?
Look, to be honest, most of it I think happened by accident. I'm a 39-year-old man, and very much the stereotypical 39-year-old man in that I played a lot of junior sport. I never played sport at an elite level. I did play some high-level football and basketball back in the day, but frustrated weekend warrior, moved on to gym and CrossFit for a little while. And then took up running as a natural progression. That came about during COVID, actually, when we didn't really have the options that we once had available to us. And actually, my brother-in-law challenged me to a month, I think it was about 4 years ago, to run 100 Ks in a month. And we ticked that off. And then he said, well, how about 200 the next month? And we had a good crack at 200, and it just became just a part of the routine from there, and found that it was a nice way to relax from the pressures that we're all facing at the time. I'm somebody who likes setting and achieving goals, and I like a bit of structure in what I'm doing. And that all fit very nicely with my lifestyle at the time, and continues to fit very nicely within the lifestyle that I've got at the moment. Yeah, as I said, I started some racing, found that I quite enjoyed preparing for and setting that goal. And I've been fortunate enough to set a couple of PBs and see some really strong positive progress along the way, which helps keep the motivation high. So look, maybe next, if I'm going to follow the stereotype, I'm going to go out and spend some money on a triathlon bike and learn how to swim. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
It's funny. It always stems with us kind of, I'm going to pull us into the same group, but us endurance athlete, it always comes from that kind of frustrated late teen, early 20s athlete, didn't quite make it in whatever the sport is, and whether you had I know some people kind of have a bit of a gap. I know I did during my early 20s. I mean, I was in the gym, but I'd hardly say I was fit, and especially in my late teens, I wasn't doing anything. I'm getting really out of shape. But there's something that's always there from that childhood, and it kind of comes back with a vengeance when you realize, okay, I'm not getting old, but I'm getting older, and I probably need to do something to keep in shape. And then that competitive edge kicks in, and it's always like onto the next thing. So you know what, if you turned around one day and was thinking, look, I might get into the triathlon, I'd be hard pushed not to go, you know what, I think I might join you on that one, because maybe not a full Ironman, but there's something about doing maybe a 70 that is quite appealing. Have you ever thought about doing a half Ironman?
Look, not seriously. I can swim. I wouldn't class myself as an elite swimmer by any stretch of the imagination, but no, ocean and open water swimming is just not for me. So I can't see it happening anytime soon. I think tell me if you think the same way, but I think part of it's about setting a good example for your kids. And promoting that healthy lifestyle. And I think some of it actually comes from making sure that you're still fit enough to beat your kids when they're old. Beat them as in defeat them, not beat them as in,
in a literal sense. We
might have to blur that one out. But yeah, you want to make sure that you can still defeat them at sport for a little while afterwards.
100%, and I'm not sure if the same goes for you, but I know my dad for the longest time growing up was into running and was always doing weight training. And although he never was kind of the competitive type, he wasn't racing or doing competitions or anything. I think that's what drove him as well, and that in turn then drove me, so that now that I'm in the same position, like, you got it bang on the head. And like, again, I'm sure the same can be said for those with little girls. I know you've got a little one. She's not quite old enough to get to that point, and I've got a little girl on the way. But it's as soon as you have a boy, I feel like that alpha mentality comes out. I'm like, damn, I need to make sure you're not catching up with me anytime soon, mate.
If my baby girl thinks that she's going to be spared from some lockdown defense, then she's got another thing coming.
Oh, for sure. And I think, you know what, I'm waiting for the day that hopefully I one day have a little girl that turns around and goes, "Oh, Daddy, I want to play football like my brother." I'd be like, "Yes, get in. I got a boy and a tomboy. Fantastic. That's a win-win." Because as much as, like, I'm sure you'd agree, as much as you want to get into the painting nails and doing whatever the girly things is, I'd be a lot happier out the back with a football or going over hills on bikes. But yeah, 100%. And then again, the last thing I'll say on this is just the day that they eventually do turn around and beat your times, like, as much as you're gutted, you're also like, this is all I want for you. I want you to be better than me. And that's why you kind of drive them to do and instill that drive in there. But yeah. 100%. On the back of, obviously, we were talking a little bit about your racing, and something that I've actually kind of reflected on as someone who's done my first marathon this year, which has basically broke me, because I've since, for anyone playing along, I've since been injured and not able to do a whole heap ever since. You're a man who has done not only 2 marathons in a year, but you've basically done 2 marathons in back-to-back months. And then, okay, something was cut as there was a dog barking in the background. But yeah, sorry, just as before the cut, we were talking about how, Scott, you're a man who has done not only 2 marathons in a year, but 2 marathons in back-to-back months, and might I add, one of those marathons was quite a pretty intense marathon with a lot of elevation. And then even earlier this month, have done not only another half marathon, but have PB'd in said half marathon. So maybe could you go into your experience with the Sydney and Melbourne marathons, obviously being in back-to-back months, and how you manage that, how you train for that, and then obviously we'll touch on Canberra a bit after. But yeah, I think let's start with the marathons, mate.
All right. Well, Sydney was at the end of August, and the Melbourne Marathon, I think, was the second weekend of October, so 6 weeks apart or 7 weeks apart. I knew about 12 months out that that was going to be the case. It wasn't something that I deliberately set out to do or set out to achieve. I can't remember which ballot came first, but
I think it was Melbourne, because I signed up for that one quite early as well.
Yeah, so I think I was actually at work when the Melbourne ballot came out, and Grace, my beautiful wife, sat at home refreshing the page and made sure that I got in. And then actually one of my colleagues at work said that she'd entered the ballot for the Sydney Marathon, and said, "Well, why don't you give that a go? It's going to be the first time it's a world major." My brother and sister-in-law live up in Sydney, so we figured it'd be a nice excuse to go up there if we got in. And I thought it was unlikely that it would get in, but as luck would have it, got accepted into the ballot for that. And then it was I think we had a few months notice to start planning for it. So it was something that we'd planned for a long way out. I think at least 6 months out. But I guess the first part was building a nice, strong aerobic base and building that into the routine. I think at the time I didn't have any firm plans or firm goals as to what the next athletic goal was going to be. And I think at the time I was probably running maybe 35 to 40 Ks a week and trying to make that around work. So we needed to make some adjustments and make sure that it was something that I was able to get to regularly and get that aerobic base in nice and early. And then once I got comfortable over those longer distances, again, starting to add in a little bit of intensity at the start and towards the end of the week, just to build that pace up, and able to do that pretty effectively. But I guess part of the plan was that Sydney was always going to be a training run, and as Melbourne would be my grand finale, so to speak. So we just planned to make sure that we got through Sydney safely, without a specific goal in mind. I guess the only goal I had, other than getting through unscathed, was to hopefully set a PB. And my first marathon was last year, ran in the Ballarat Marathon. My time was 3:34. So I said, going into Sydney, as long as I don't get injured, that would be number one. And if it just so happened that I was able to set a PB without trashing my body for Melbourne, then that would be just that, to borrow a phrase from this podcast, the icing on the cherry. But Sydney was a great run. Pulled through that very well. Finished that in 3 hours 24. And you mentioned at the start of the pod, that was the one that was probably a lot more hilly than I expected it to be. So lots of long, gradual uphill climbs, and I think about 350 of elevation over the course. And then knuckled down for Melbourne. After that, just added in a little bit more intensity, dropped the Ks down a little bit, and then had a week and a half, 2-week taper before the big day. And everything came together on the day. I left everything out there and managed to run a 3:12, which I was absolutely stoked with. Do you want me to go on to Canberra now?
I think we've got plenty to touch, and I've got a million questions, because even though I know we've spoken a lot about this and we've done a couple of runs and chatted about things, but even let's talk. Obviously, you did Ballarat back in 2024, and that was I remember because I was training Grace at the time, and that's kind of what planted the idea in my head that there even was a marathon in Ballarat. So maybe first off, obviously that was your first experience doing a marathon, and there's quite a long period of time between that and doing Sydney. You've got not quite a year and a half, but a year and a few months. So maybe if you could go into how you approach the marathons differently, and like what you learnt from doing Ballarat that first time around going into Sydney. And obviously context matters. Like, again, we know that your plan was initially just to do Sydney as a training run, and your real goal was Melbourne. But obviously doing a marathon in itself requires a lot of, I suppose, forethought and planning. So maybe if you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, look, that's definitely the key thing that's come out of this whole experience for me is the importance of having a plan, and having that specificity in your training. Um, my original plan for the first marathon was to get into the Melbourne Marathon the year before, so the end of 2023. And I'd ramped up my running leading up to that, expecting that I would get a last minute call up and somebody would pull out, because I think that year they had a waiting list, and that call never came, unfortunately. So I peaked far too soon, and then the next couple of months, we had young child, just work life getting in the way. Those long runs and certainly the regular long runs dropped right off. And I think from November until August when the race was on, I think that the longest run I did was 21 Ks. And then naively thought I was going to keep that conditioning for the whole time, go out there and smash my goal. I was lucky enough that I finished. But that last 10 Ks, we all know, anyone who's run a marathon knows that the last 10 Ks is where the race really starts. But geez, I really felt it in that last 10 Ks, and that experience really highlighted to me that the importance of having that plan and having that strong aerobic base to make sure that you're finishing strong, you're not trashing your body, and that if you are going to go faster, you need a really specific plan, and ideally involving people that have done it before.
And did you, like, going into Sydney, do you feel like you were more ready in a sense that you had that aerobic base, or what was it specifically? Was it the long runs you think you did it? Was it just total volume, or was there anything that you were like, yes, I've nailed this time around?
I think it was probably the consistent big volumes of training. It was the gradual ramp up to that, and establishing a consistent routine where I was running 80 Ks a week. So being able to do that regularly, I think, made a huge difference. And also having 18 months to, I guess, learn more about the endurance physiology. Certainly, as part of my my medical training is not something we specifically learnt about, but something that I found really interesting was learning the science behind the endurance physiology and being able to apply that, things like training principles and nutrition principles and the importance of recovery, and realizing that, I'm a 38 going on 39-year-old man who, can't just roll out of bed and expect you're going to achieve these massive athletic goals, that you really need to be dialed in and deliberately practicing the right things.
And on that point, obviously you're in a similar, I'd say a more, I suppose extreme is maybe an aggressive, a bit of a hyperbole, but obviously I'm dealing with working around the one little one, and you've got three at the end of the day, right? You're a busy man. You're working a more demanding job than me, and then you've got not only you marathon training, but your marathon training for Sydney, and then 7 weeks later you got Melbourne. So was there anything specifically you had to, I suppose, do in terms of, okay, I need to be careful with this, or how did you manage obstacles? And then, maybe kind of go into depth, because obviously we worked a bit together on your plan between Sydney and Melbourne to make sure you not only got to Melbourne in one piece, but also were able to give it the best shot, because we all know that marathons at the best of times are pretty taxing. And then Sydney, you had that elevation, which 300 and something is a lot of elevation for a marathon. In fact, it's the most elevation for any major. I think it pips Boston.
I have a feeling I read somewhere that Boston might just be a little bit more, but if it's not the highest, it's the second highest elevation of the majors, as far as I know.
I'm going to do some. This is where I need a backroom staff to do this, but people don't mind. Me and Adam also go off. No, it's Sydney. Sydney is the most. Doesn't say which. Boston is second, so Sydney's 317 and Boston is 2:48. So there you go. You
Mm,
can officially say
there you
not
go.
only have you done a major, you've done the most elevation. But yeah, going
There
back
you go.
to the question, how did you
Mm.
manage kind of life and all this kind of stuff? Because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are in similar boats and aren't all professional athletes, although I'm sure they're out there. Maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Well, I guess first and foremost, I couldn't have done it without Grace's help. It's the early mornings, it's the time away from home, it's her taking on the childcare burden while I'm out doing that and chasing my dreams. That I couldn't have done any of this without her help. And I like to think that I'm more than holding my own at home and helping her do what she needs to do. But yeah, certainly that was really important and made the world a difference for me. Look, I wouldn't say my job's more intense than yours necessarily, but I guess the key difference there is that I'm working shift work in an emergency
Mm,
department with an irregular schedule, which has some benefits, but it also has its own challenges. And even more so, I guess when the kids are up early, I've worked an evening shift. In some ways, I think I'd like the Monday to Friday 9 to 5. Well, not that it's 9 to 5 for you, but that traditional business hour job,
mhm,
which might give me a little bit more regularity in training. But yeah, I guess with shift work, you've just got to find some ways around it. A big part of that, other than the support of your partner and your other loved ones, is making sure that you've got a plan for that
mhm,
and scheduling it in and enlisting other people's help where you can.
mhm,
Making sure that I'm resting properly. So it's getting good sleep when I'm able to do that. It's maybe postponing those harder or longer workouts until later in the day or until I've got a run of days off, and being flexible to change things up if things aren't going to plan. If you get a bad night's sleep or, the kids are up particularly early or, you just find yourself a little bit run down from working consecutive evenings, it's just making sure you've got flexibility to push your more intense sessions
mhm.
and your key sessions to perhaps later in the week. I guess the other thing is I found that ditching that arbitrary 7-day cycle really helped as well.
Yeah.
So not being fixated on having a 7-day cycle and I've got to achieve this and this week,
Mhm.
and just rolling it over because you've got that inconsistency in your schedule that I think a 7-day cycle just really doesn't apply to.
Yeah, 100%. That's actually something that Adam and I think we may have touched on in the past, but definitely something that deserves more attention is the fact that like the 7 day week is completely arbitrary. And at the end of the day, like it's the body doesn't know the difference between one week and another week. It just knows it knows night and day, and that's about it really. And these adaptations don't just happen on a 7 day basis. And realistically, if you need to push out a session or volume across a wider time frame, like the body doesn't know. And frankly, I think a lot of people, including myself, have got wrong in the past, and maybe kind of this is something that does come with experience, is knowing that, well, look, I'm not feeling great at the moment. I could just flog myself and do my marathon session on a day where I've had a shit sleep, or I'm run down from work, or I can push it out another couple of days. And I think that's something that, even just from me observing your runs, and obviously we touch base quite frequently about training, you've done a great job of that. And even in this latest block between Sydney and Melbourne, I could see that you were we had the plan, and I think that was really important to have I suppose the blueprint for the house. But then it was a case of, well, okay, there's planning disruptions. We need to adjust A and B. And do you find that something that's you're kind of now at a point where you're just like, oh, it's whatever, or is it kind of gets you a little bit? Do you still go, oh man, I wish I'd have done that run, or I wish I'd have been able to do this, or you just like, look, it is what it is.
Look, I can't say I've ever got any regrets from looking after my body. I know that's going to
Mhm.
pay dividends going forward, and that's a big part of how Grace and I live our life, and maybe
Mhm.
something we can touch on a little bit later. But yeah, the importance of having those building blocks in place, and doing the big things rather than worrying too much about those little 1%ers. It's
Mhm.
just making sure you get all the basics right. You know,
Mhm.
you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you're training properly. You know, you're not doing anything that's harmful to you, or minimizing the effect of harmful stuff to you, and making sure you've got a good support network in place.
Mhm. And the next thing I kind of want to go on to, which we haven't really spoken about much, but how you actually found the marathon experiences themselves. Like, where again we do all this training for it, and it's important to talk about that. But was how was it running a world major, and how was it running Melbourne, and was it what you expected? Did you have fun?
I had a blast. Sydney was enjoyable in its own right. It was a great atmosphere, and certainly by far the best atmosphere that of any race that I've been involved in.
Mhm.
Melbourne, the atmosphere was great as well, but perhaps felt a little bit more pressure going into Melbourne, in that
Mm.
was my finale, and there was a bit of pressure that I'd put on myself to make sure that all the training had been worth it. So I think on the whole, the Sydney experience was probably one I enjoyed more. What I didn't enjoy about Sydney was navigating from the finishing chute out of there, which is for anybody who did Sydney, you finish or knows the layout of Sydney. You finish down near the Opera House, and they funnel you into this chute along the water, and then the village itself is on this steep uphill after you've just done the run, or the major with the highest elevation of all the world majors. They make you walk up this giant hill. And then I had to meet Grace and my brother and sister-in-law on the other side of the city, and trying to navigate through the thousands and thousands of people that had lined the streets was an absolute nightmare. But as far as the running experience itself was great. You got people on every square foot of the course cheering you
Mm.
on. There's random strangers just calling out your name and egging you on. There were actually some people that I knew from Melbourne who unexpectedly in the crowd, not there to support me, but they saw me running past and were following on the tracking apps that
Mhm.
that some of these bigger runs have got. It just gives you that little pop of encouragement as you go. So yeah, Sydney, great experience. Melbourne, also great experience, but in a different way.
In
And something that, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, as a Melburnian, I know you guys have pretty, for the most part, not all of you, but have strong opinions about Sydney. But be honest with me, what was the better run event? What was more kind of, wow, this is done well? Do you think it was Sydney because of the major
Yeah, look,
status?
hopefully more of your viewers are in Sydney rather than Melbourne. But
In all fairness, most of our viewers are over in the UK and Ireland, so don't
oh,
worry
good,
about
they won't care.
it.
No, look, Sydney. Honestly, Sydney, I found much more enjoyable.
Okay.
Yeah, not that I didn't enjoy Melbourne, but yeah, I think there's a little bit more relaxed, and the atmosphere was very different in Sydney
Mm,
than it was in Melbourne.
interesting. And obviously, I'm guessing the crowds were a fair bit bigger in Sydney as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Melbourne, there's a lot more time to be alone with your thoughts. I guess
Yeah.
that's a good thing or bad thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, certainly when you're trying to push out 42 Ks, you might want a little bit of distraction along the way. So rather than, um, yeah, I think having people cheering you on, and being able to silence the music in your ears,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just great experience.
100. I was actually going to touch on that because I mean, my only experience was Ballarat, and I'm sure it was this to a greater extent back in 2024 because it was a slightly smaller event. But there was times on the run, especially when you're running around the river in Ballarat, that it's like there's no one there. It feels like a training run, and if you're when you're going through the second half because you're basically towards the top end of people. Yeah, you're not catching people up yet. You're not quite lapping people, but the group is splitting. You're literally there on your own for 100 meters forward, 100 meters backwards, and it's like, man, it feels like a training run. I'm like, I need something here, and it can actually get really like. It's nice sometimes to be by yourself, but I think when you're in the second half of marathon, you need something because you do not want to be left alone with your thoughts at K35 and yeah, 10 gels deep.
Yeah, Canberra was a lot of running on my own as well,
Mhm.
especially towards the end. And yeah, Ballarat was the same, but two very, very different experiences. Ballarat was was pure pain running on your own.
Yeah.
And by that stage, I was absolutely cooked, and
Hmm.
it was pretty demoralizing having people pass you at the 35, 38, 40K mark
Yep.
until you get that last little burst of speed. But yeah, then again, Canberra, for large sections you're on your own, and there's guys playing saxophone and DJs out there, and it's like they've shut the whole city just for you to do a training run. It was
Yep.
it's quite a nice feeling.
Maybe go into that, in fact, just because obviously Canberra was the half marathon. Did they have a full? Was that the full marathon as well on the day?
Not
Or
this year.
okay.
No. They have another festival. I think it's in April or sometime earlier in the year where
Hmm.
they have the marathon festival and a half
Hmm.
marathon option. But this one in November, they've just got the half option as the longest distance.
And talk to us about the plan or lack thereof around Canberra. What inspired that one, and how I know the story, but how did tell us about the run up, and then just kind of take us through start to finish, really.
Yeah, look, Canberra was just something we did on a little bit of a whim. Actually, I'd never, despite living in Australia all my life, I've never actually been to Canberra.
Hmm.
Um, we're looking for places we can take the kids and different experiences that we can give them. And saw that Canberra had a half marathon, and it was only 3 weeks after Melbourne. And I said to Grace, "Do you want to go? Do you want to go to Canberra for a weekend?" She's like, "Yeah, why not?"
Hmm.
So yeah, signed up to that with zero expectation other than just doing it with the idea of seeing a bit of the city, a city that I'd never seen before, and not giving any consideration as to what time I ran or anything. So just did that without any pressure whatsoever, and fortunately, I still had a good enough base to set a PB in that, despite spending the day before at the winery with half a dozen wines under my belt. So.
Sinking a few cheeky reds and a little bit of charcuterie.
Look, it was more white weather. We had beautiful weather while we were up there.
Hmm.
It was I think mid-20s, beautiful sunshine on the weekend of the run. I think the Monday and the Friday before were pissing rain, but yeah, no, definitely more of a white vibe.
Hmm.
And the area well known for some of its white wines,
Hmm.
Riesling and Chardonnay in particular. So doing my bit, supporting the locals.
Hmm. For sure, you have to, like when in Rome, as they say. But
Absolutely.
so did you go into the run? Obviously, like it was correct me if I'm wrong, it was 1:30. Your finishing time.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, 1:30:49 was the
how
finishing time.
how much did you PB by from your last half?
That was about 90 seconds.
So I mean, it's bearing in mind there was no like real training between Melbourne and Canberra. I think it kind of highlights how much how much benefit or the stimulus you can get from a marathon if you recover right. And this is obviously something we spoke about quite a lot. And the goal kind of post marathon, you have to treat that recovery periods correctly. And if you do, you've got potentially weeks of training under your belt from one run. So I guess it highlights that. But maybe I think if you want to kind of go into your thoughts about kind of just having that relaxed state, and if there even was a plan on your end, like did you go into it wanting to just kind of feel it out? Because I know Adam's done a couple of halves where he's just gone, oh, I'm just gonna like treat it as a training run. I'm not gonna look at my pace. I'm gonna run comfortably and see where it goes. But were you looking at the watch at all? Were you finding, or were you just like, I'm just gonna go out and run?
Yeah, look, I'll be honest, I'm a big watcher.
Hmm.
I'm very, very much aware of the time that I'm running.
Hmm.
The plan was literally just to set out and see how the body felt and how it responded. And I think the first couple of Ks, I think we're in the low 420s, and the body felt good. And the plan was just to continue that as long as I could. And if I started to get fatigued, I had no problems cutting it back if I felt I needed to. But
Hmm.
yeah, look, the body just kept responding. And I think the last 3 or 4 Ks, I think we're about the 4 minute flat pace.
Mm.
So there was enough in the tank to finish that. but yeah,
Was
I think it's certainly something you and I have spoken about.
Mhm.
That aerobic base is really hard to lose as long as you do the recovery right. It does take a while to go away. It's that more top end speed that you lose if
Mhm.
you are taking weeks off training. But yeah, even with a week and a half of recovery after Melbourne and a pretty light week and a half leading up to Canberra, that base was still there. And fortunately able to put it all together on the day, which was nice.
For sure. And was there a time during the half where you were like, "Fuck yeah, this is on today"? Like I'm feeling like I can get a bit, or was it just like, "Oh man, I'm doing well. I'm going to keep running. Oh, I'm still doing well."
Yeah, look, to be honest, I didn't know what my PB for the half was.
Okay.
I think the last one, the half I did was the Run Melbourne half. Actually,
Mm.
no, sorry, it wasn't the Run Melbourne half. It
Wasn't it
was the
Melbourne
it's the
2024?
Melbourne Marathon.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I wasn't really aware of exactly what my PB was. And then it kind of got to a point. It's like, oh, I'm on track for about a 1 hour 32. I'll see how far I can take
Mhm.
this. And then it almost got to a point. It's like, you know what? I might actually go under a minute 30 if I'm good here. But I think the intensity of the race probably got to my head a little bit, and my maths was out. So
Yeah.
it ended up, yeah, I think it was 1:30:49 in
Mhm.
the end. So not really that close to breaking 1:30, but yeah, certainly enough to beat that PB.
I'd honestly, I'd disagree. I think I think that says you're probably quite close to a sub 130, and I think I know you've kind of taken a bit of a step away from racing from the time for the time being at least, but I definitely think there's a 129 to be had. So I reckon all it's going to be is a couple of months of quality training, and it's there to have. At least I'd put my money on it. But yeah, maybe like talk. I've kind of just given a little bit of a spoiler away, but what's the plans from here with training, and what does maybe 2026 look like for you? Something was cut again. We had audio issues, but we are back. So, Scott, you were just telling me about the plans for 2026 and what training is going to look like potentially from here.
Podcast rookie here. That was my my doing with the audio. Yeah, look, I'm not sure what 2026 is going to look like at this stage. At least for the immediate term, it's going to be supporting Grace. She's recently taken up running herself,
Mhm.
so I'm very keen to support that and help her develop a routine. And yeah, not that I was spending huge amount of times away from home, but yeah, I think not having to spend hours at a time away from home as part of the training and being able to reinvest that in the kids is something that's really exciting. And to be honest, a little bit of freedom. I know I said earlier that I like structure in what I'm doing and what I'm trying to achieve, but equally, being able to step away from that I guess being locked into a particular program and
Mm.
just being able to do what feels good, and a little bit more freedom in the day to day activity is something I'm really really looking forward to. I think at some point I'll set a target for a race, maybe a 5K, and maybe just try and bring a little bit more pace to that.
Mhm.
Might be the next goal, but yeah, at this stage, very much just enjoying not having a plan.
Fantastic. Yeah, you're in a very similar boat to me on that front, and it does definitely have its perks. And one of them, as you mentioned, is not having to go out for 2+ hours on a weekend morning when you could be with the family, slogging through a long run. So yeah, 100%. I feel that. And look, I'm conscious I don't have you forever, although I could easily chat to you about running for forever, in fact. But maybe now, obviously, let's touch on a little bit about, we won't go too much into your career, of course, but you've recently started up Tailored Healthcare Solutions, which is obviously looking at kind of more taking your healthcare background and looking at how you can apply that to normal people, just to help get the most out of kind of life, I suppose. Looking at, okay, how can we help people to thrive and perform at their best? So maybe talk to us about what inspired that and what that looks like going forward.
Mm. So I mentioned earlier, I'm an emergency doctor by trade, and Grace is an emergency nurse. Um, every shift we're seeing people who come in who have a poor health baseline and who experience poor health outcomes. And we're seeing higher and higher rates of what can be considered lifestyle-related diseases that, for a number of reasons, us in emergency are becoming increasingly required to help manage. So this is a new skill set that we've had to build because people don't have ideal access to their GPs. They have, in a lot of cases, low health literacy, and they don't look after their health for a number of reasons. And we found that a lot of the things that we're seeing in the emergency department, things like heart attacks and strokes, high rates of diabetes and the complications that come with that, so much of that's actually preventable disease. It's coming out for a number of reasons. It's increasing sedentary nature of people's work. It's the modern diet. It's people trying to deal with the chaos of modern life and not prioritizing their sleep. It's people who are overindulging in alcohol. It's the loneliness epidemic that we're experiencing and have experienced a big part as a result of COVID. People having trouble accessing mental health services. From my own perspective, it's the disruption in circadian rhythm as a result of shift work. In my colleagues, I see that we're seeing higher rates of burnout, which the physiological stresses that come with all of that. A big part of that's preventable, and we've realised that there's a lot of overlap between the advice that we're now imparting and the things that we've learned with our own athletic pursuits and trying to be our best. And obviously, as we mentioned earlier, trying to set a good example for the kids. So we found that there's this unique opportunity for us to marry what we've learnt, what we're interested in, and put together something that can impact a big portion of the population potentially by optimizing people's health and helping to prevent these diseases through targeted measures and comprehensive healthcare plans.
For sure. And it's if my understanding is correct, it's like it sounds to me as someone who's experienced like the NHS and I've experienced Australian healthcare that a lot of the times it's looking at just kind of it's dealing with or kind of medicating an issue without necessarily look at why it's happening in the first place. And so I suppose this kind of, although this is something that would be great that if healthcare systems could deal with, but at least that then leaves a gap for you guys to come in and someone who I've experienced the service firsthand, and it's amazing to see how much you care and your knowledge being put to good use. But it does leave the gap for you guys and the people that do truly care. But maybe you could touch on what the process looks like how you would approach managing someone like even myself. Like, how would you go about that? Like from start to finish in terms of finding the issue, dealing with the issue, and then and so on.
Yeah, look, I guess it's going to differ depending on who we're dealing with, what their baseline health literacy is like, what their baseline health is like, and what their values and their ultimate healthcare goals are going to be. We're going to approach people differently, but I guess the first step is that information gathering phase where you're trying to learn as much about somebody as you can. Not just from their health background, but also the circumstances of their life, what sort of job they do, do they have a support network around them? What's their interest in physical exercise? What do they like doing? What do they not like doing? How do they eat? Obviously, diet's pretty complex, and there's lots of social and cultural influences there. Are they somebody who relies on alcohol to get to sleep at night? Are they somebody who's burning the candle at both ends, working late or staying up late watching TV, getting up early to go to work? What are they trying to achieve with their athletic pursuits? And then looking at for most people, it's going to involve some blood work. We know that there's a lot of diseases that have an insidious onset, and that may not actually have any symptoms to start with until the process is in its more advanced stages. And there's obviously a big target as far as the things that are hurting, harming, and killing people. In that, we're getting high rates of cardiovascular disease. We're seeing increasing rates of diabetes. Things like dementia with people living longer are becoming more and more common. Cancers related to people's lifestyle. There's a big opportunity for intervention there, and we know that 80%, it's estimated that up to 80% of cardiovascular disease could actually be prevented, and somewhere around 50% of type 2 diabetes could be prevented by instituting lifestyle measures that people don't necessarily understand, or aren't, even if they do understand, aren't able to implement strategies to counteract that effectively for whatever reason. So I guess part of the work we're trying to do is identifying what those barriers might be, and where these risks for future problems might be, and helping people make deliberate choices and take deliberate measures to reduce the risk of things going wrong down the track. And we know that if you're not measuring things, then you can't manage these things. You're just guessing.
For sure. And I'm sure to an extent you'll obviously want to individualize, I guess, your approach to people to make sure you're giving someone, no pun intended, a bit of a tailored approach. But obviously, is there? That's very good, wasn't it? For me, very quick. There you go, comedian today as well. But when let's say you've got a new client in, are you using what is kind of like trending is a very bad word for this instance, but are you seeing trends? Are you going to go, look, okay, when someone new comes in, we need to check for A, B, and C as a given? Like, are you taking like blanket assumptions that, okay, we need to test for this or have a look at that? And if so, what are those things that people should be, I suppose, watching out for?
There are some givens that we are going to test for, things that we know are risk factors for those diseases, and things that may not actually have symptoms until they manifest as things like heart attacks or strokes. And it's the decisions that we make now in our 20s, 30s, and 40s that are going to influence that risk down the track. And whether that event comes in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, in a lot of cases it can be hard to predict when it's going to happen. But we can identify through those non-negotiable investigations that what people's risk might be, and try and intervene on those before they become a problem. So I think you would have seen it in NHS, and in a lot of cases we're seeing it mirrored in our own healthcare system, that we're very much reactive to disease rather than proactive. A big part of that is just because the system's under strain. We just don't have the resources to actually invest in preventative healthcare. And certainly from a policy perspective and a government perspective, is preventative healthcare is not sexy. They want to put money towards something that's going to be seen to make a difference, and seen to make a difference during their election cycle, rather than something that's going to make a difference in 20 years' time.
Look, I think that's a really nice place to wrap it up. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on the pod. I'm sure the listeners will have had a lot to benefit from in your experience, and obviously your racing and healthcare background. So thank you again, Scott. And guys, Adam and I should be back. I know we've had a couple of we've had a few weeks all over the place, frankly. We've had guests and we've been doing solo pods, but we haven't seen each other in quite a while. But hopefully next week, if we can align our schedules, we'll be back. And then, we'll basically be in the run-in till Christmas and the New Year. So, I look forward to that. But guys, thanks again for taking the time to watch, listen. If we've got any new followers as well, hello. Thank you for taking the time. And we're looking forward to checking in with you guys again soon. Take care.